Everyone, Kay Berkner here today with Dr. Tom Phelan, author and creator of The Manager Mom Epidemic and the author and creator of 123 Magic. Dr. Phelan, welcome.
Good morning, or afternoon, Kay.
Usually we do these in the morning, so we're a little off today, but it's good to see you. Today we are talking about teenagers. Obviously it can be such a joy to watch your child grow in their independence and grow towards adulthood. And it can also be a real challenge to figure out how to interact with this teenager on a daily basis. Teen brains are changing and developing really in much the same way that toddler brains are, right? Like there's a lot of change that happens in the teenager's brain, and it can kind of seem to parents like they've become crazy people. So, what happens as a child becomes a teenager that causes their behavior to change so dramatically?
Well, one way of looking at it, it's funny, you mentioned toddlers and teens. And if you ask yourself the question, what do toddlers and teens share in common? What they share, a 2-year-old and a 16-year-old, a ferocious drive for independence. And that means independence from you, their mother or father. And, 300 or 400 years ago, we probably didn't have adolescence. You'd grow up and at 14, 15, you might get a job, move, get married, all kinds of things might happen. But now we have this prolonged period of time where the kids are still getting educated and they have to live with us. And you may not know it, but teens resent that. That's insulting. They're as big as we are. They feel like they can do things. They feel like they're as competent to do things as we are. And our society does not do a good job of letting them manage a lot of their own thing. Not that we should let them do everything, but they're feeling the push of that independence, and they're feeling the sort of oppression from mom and dad just being there some of the time. So it makes for a difficult combination.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest challenges we hear expressed when it comes to teenagers is communication, right? You used to have this chatty child who would come home and tell you all about their day every day, and to the point where you're like, no, I've heard about what Mrs. Smith did in class 3 or 4 times already. That's great, honey. Yeah. And now you're a teenager, you might ask them how things are and they'd be like, fine, good. Like you've suddenly lost a lot of that communication. And in the book, in the 123 Magic Teen, you have a bit of a translation guide that can really help parents understand what it is their teenagers are hearing when they talk. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, let's use that. We'll use that dinner time conversation as a guide. And you sit down with your 16-year-old daughter or whatever, and at age 9, she was chatty Cathy, and now 16, you say, how was your day? And she says, fine. And you say, what did you do? And she says, nothing. And what we parents often forget, and if you think back to your own, days as a teenager, teens will often translate that question, how was your day, into this question: did you screw up anything today that I need to know about? And then they take offense. Now, a lot of parents will tell me, I say, Dr. Phelan, that's not the way I intend it. It is some of the time. Some parents don't intend it that way. They just want to make conversation. Some parents do intend it that way. They're thinking this creature here is a incomplete product of my assembly line, and I want to make sure that she is turning out all right. So how was your day? I want you to reassure me. And so on. But when you're talking about translations, teens they'll hear it differently than it may have been intended and take offense. And now you're off to the races, or you're going nowhere, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some positive ways for parents to start conversations and engage with their teens if it's not, how was your day?
That's right. Well, first, in your own mind, you got to make up your mind. Why are you wanting to talk to them? And if it's to check up on them, then shut up. Don't say anything. It's not a good motive. If you just want to carry on a conversation.
I think we've had Dr. Phelan freeze for just a moment there. I am sure that he will be back shortly. What we are talking about is teenagers, some of the communication challenges that we have with them as they transition from childhood to teen years, and some of the ways that we can deal with that. The other thing that we're going to be talking about is when you do have a behavior challenge with a teenager. With a younger child, you can use counting, and with a teenager, you may use something else. So we'll get to that next. Dr. Phelan, welcome back. I think you were just about to tell us what are some of the positive ways for parents to engage with their teens. And the last thing that we heard was if if you're trying to talk to them in order to check in on them, just don't.
Right.
So then, but what if we are trying to talk to them because we just want to have a conversation, because we want to connect?
Sure. You have really two choices. One is talk about yourself. One is talk about a neutral topic, but an exciting, interesting topic. So I used to sometimes when my son was in his crabby teenage years and stuff, I would tell him something about my crabby teenage years or what happened at work today. But it's got to be newsworthy to engage them. The other thing you could talk about, I mean, if you want to, you could talk about politics. You could talk about COVID. You could talk about other things that it doesn't put them on the spot, and they don't feel like they're being diagnosed. And you can have some very nice conversations. It's kind of an unequal footing.
Absolutely. So that's sort of on the positive side of things. Obviously, with this growing independence and the desire to move toward adulthood, combined with peer pressure in some instances, that's going to kind of put some risk factors in your teen's path. What are the biggest things that parents need to be thinking about?
Yeah, well, the big risk you're thinking about, driving, drugs and alcohol, sex, technology, I think are probably the biggest ones. And what you want to think about is that the research seems to tell us that how do you keep teens safe from these things, driving, drugs, alcohol, sex, technology, and that kind of thing. And the research seems to say that reasonable monitoring. So you have hours, you may have house rules, that are reasonable and stuff, and an open and friendly relationship as much as you can with the kid is what makes teens safer. So we go back to what we were just talking about. How do you carry on a conversation? That's where you can. So if you have a warm and friendly relationship with them, and you can talk openly about things. Now, there's going to be some restrictions on it because they're going to talk more to their peers than they will to you. But if you keep that philosophy in mind, then that's how you try and help them not get hurt.
Absolutely. So if a teen does do something that they're not supposed to be doing, and particularly for smaller things around the house, whether it's speaking to their parents disrespectfully, whether it's not doing something that they should have done. With younger children, obviously we can use counting for misbehavior, but I think for most teens, we're probably not going to count them and send them to their room for a 15 or 16-minute timeout. What happens as kids transition into teen years? If your teen does do something that they shouldn't, what should you as a parent do about it?
Well, there are a couple of rules here. One is there are parents who continue counting with their teens if they've used counting their whole life, but they restrict the number of things that they count. So we tell parents of teens, your kids now have what we call their MBAs, minor but aggravating problems that can maybe irritate you, but aren't a behavior problem or don't need discipline. And that might be the way they talk some of the time, might be the way they dress, might be the way they eat, it might be the friends that you have, but these may be things that you are going to put up with and ignore. If you do feel there's a problem and something that's going on that you don't really care for, what you want to do is, it's going to sound funny, you want to make an appointment. Spontaneous discussions about problems are dangerous, provocative, bad news. You don't just all of a sudden say, look, I got a progress report on biology for you today. What the hell's going on here? That's not what you do. You say, I got a progress report. It's not good. I want to talk to you about it sometime. When's good for you? And you set up a time to do a one-on-one instead of springing it on them. So we're going to do more of the one-on-one conversations with the bigger kids than with the little ones.
Absolutely. It's almost like management advice, right? Yeah. Like in the business world, they tell you if you're going to deliver sort of negative feedback or a reprimand to someone, you never do it in front of a group of people. You kind of do it one-on-one, and it's a more respectful conversation, and the person that you're delivering that feedback to will appreciate it. So
I think that's a good analogy to a manager in a business. It's not exactly what you're doing, but it means you are going to put some thought into it. You're going to be more careful. And in families, there's a rule in psychology that all of us show our worst behavior at home. So if you're upset about your teen's behavior, that's not the way you want to handle it.
Why is it that people show their worst behavior at home?
I think it's because we're so used to these other folks that we don't care as much what they think of us. And we're just careless. At work, you got to be more careful. At school, you're going to be more careful and all this. But you guys here, I don't have to dress up for you. I don't have to, be on my best behavior. And so it's sort of the heck with it. And I think we get kind of sloppy. And I think we get too sloppy. And that's a bad thing.
Yeah. And I think on the other side of it, I've read that as a parent, especially when you have younger kids, but I'm sure this applies to teenagers as well, like when they walk in the door and suddenly are bickering or kind of jumping on you, right? Like that doesn't feel good as a parent. But something I saw that gave me some perspective was it's because they feel like you're the safe place. So if they're coming in and sort of behaving like that, it's because they've really been trying to hold it together all day. And now they're home and they feel comfortable and they feel safe. So while it is not necessarily a behavior that you love, it can also be a good indication of how your child feels in your house.
It does. And I think it makes a big difference. Are they complaining about you or are they complaining about something that happened at school? And if they're complaining about their friends or something that happened, now it's time to put on your warm listening shoes and say, tell me what happened. It sounds like something. And you go back to the question, how do you get them to talk to you? That's how you get them to talk to you, is when they complain about something. You don't say, you're always complaining, I don't want to hear about it, I had a bad day too. You want to listen as best you can.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Phelan. If you have a teen at home or have a child who is soon to be a teen, and these are things that you're concerned about, Dr. Phelan is doing a free seminar on 1, 2, 3 Magic and teenagers next week on Wednesday. So we'll drop the link to that in our social media here. And we'll also be sending it out in our weekly newsletter. So if you're not already signed up, head over to 123magic.com and get signed up so you can get the links to those free seminars, parenting tips, videos, downloadables, and more. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.